Hey guys, tonight we wander barefoot across high grasses, slick with twilight dew under a sky that smells like firewood and ancient earth. You're in the Ethiopian highlands land of deep greens, red clay, and strange humming winds. Somewhere behind you, a shepherd's flute cries out across the hills. In front of you, a circle of women roast small, dark seeds over a pan that pops and sings. No one calls it coffee yet. Not really. But the scent, it pierces through your chest like a story you forgot you knew. You sit on a woven mat as the smoke curls upward, soft and thin, like the tail of a dreaming cat. The beans are turning oily, changing from pale green to brown, then black. A child hands you a stone pestle and a carved wooden bowl. You glance around. Everyone is watching. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, drop your location and local time in the comments. You know, I read those. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start grinding, slowly. The heat from the roasted beans radiates into your palms. The rhythm of stone on wood is steady, soothing even. You're not making a drink yet. This is a ceremony, or at least it will be one 1,000 years from now. Right now, you're just following something older than language, the human urge to roast, grind, and transform. This area today, called Kaffa, sits like a quietly smug origin story. Lush, misty, tucked between river valleys. Wild coffee trees grow like weeds here. The beans are bitter if you chew them raw, but once roasted, there's a hint of something addictive, something warm. You know what's funny? Nobody here is thinking about lattes or frappuccinos. There's no drive-through line of camel caravans honking. No branded mugs that say, "But first coffee." Not yet. Right now it's about survival story and maybe a little stubborn habit. You stare into the fire. There's a calm to this even as the flames crackle and lick upward. A woman leans over the beans, fanning them with a flat reed. Her hands are scarred and practiced. You smell smoke, wood, heat, and what is that, juniper? Yeah, someone threw in a sprig, just for scent, or maybe to keep the evil spirits away. Either way, it smells amazing. Here's the first real fact of the night. Wild coffee trees, Coffea arabica, are native to Ethiopia. Not Yemen, not Brazil, not Starbucks HQ, Ethiopia. Specifically forests like these. It's not just a birthplace, it's a cradle. But there's a fringe theory that'll mess with your head. Some believe humans didn't just find coffee here, they co-evolved with it. Meaning the reason it triggers our brains so well is because it grew up right beside us over thousands of years. You and coffee star-crossed lovers, made for each other. Historians still argue whether humans domesticated coffee or if coffee domesticated us. The fire pops again like it agrees. A few older men mumble softly near the edge of the circle. One is chewing, cat leaves another smoking something that definitely isn't a cigarette. They're not part of the ceremony. Not really, but they're watching. Everyone watches. This is social glue. Even before it's formalized into what we now call the coffee ceremony, roasting these beans becomes a ritual people need. You lean back. It's been a long trek to get here. Your feet are cracked, your legs stiff. You passed through mountain trails, crossed a river by stepping on actual crocodiles, okay? Just one, and it didn't notice. The point is, this is no tourist stop. It's ancient living history. And here's your second odd tidbit of the night: those early roasts. They weren't always brewed. Some people just chewed the roasted beans. Others mixed the grounds with animal fat to form early protein balls, a sort of prehistoric energy snack. Move over protein bars. Chaldees goat chews are here. Of course, whether any of this happened the way legends say, that's murky. The earliest stories weren't written down for centuries. You're sitting in a time before writing. Stories pass from mouth to ear like smoke from one hut to another. One day, someone will write that a boy named Chalde noticed his goats getting hyped up after eating the red berries. Cute story. probably total nonsense. You blink slowly as the stars begin to crawl out across the sky. A donkey brays somewhere far off its tone, just grumpy enough to break the moment. You breathe in. Coffee smoke, ash, juniper, something herbal, something wild. You're not sleepy yet. You're deeply, deeply mellow. The roasting is done. The beans are black, shiny, whispering cracks as they cool. One of the women scoops them into a thick clay mortar and begins grinding in slow circular motions. You offer your bowl, but she waves you off. Grinding is an honor. You're still an outsider. Still you're here. Witness to the birth of something we'll spend the next 16 sections slowly unraveling. Just as your eyes begin to flutter closed, someone lifts the jabina, a rounded clay pot with a long neck, and starts to boil the water. The hum of conversation stills. Even the goats shut up for once. This is it. The first cup is coming, and whether it's a sacred act, a morning boost, or just a really well-aged accident, you're here for it. You blink slowly, still crouched near the hearth, your knees stiff and dust clinging to your toes. The jabina bubbles like an old man muttering into his beard, and steam wafts out the spout in slow ribbons. There's no handle, no polished steel, no temperature gauge, just clay water and heat. Yet somehow this simple pot carries the heartbeat of a whole culture. Someone ladles out the first thick pour. It's not clear like the drip coffee you know. It's dense, murky, bold. The grounds haven't settled yet, and as the hot liquid slides into a row of small, handleless cups, Sinai, you can feel a kind of reverence take hold, quiet but firm. No one gulps, no one rushes. Each cup is passed from hand to hand like it weighs far more than it does. Now, somewhere in the blurry folds of time, let's say a few centuries after your current dusty perch, an adorable little myth begins to grow legs. Enter Kaldi. Poor Kaldi, the poster boy of caffeinated livestock. According to the tale, Kaldi was a goat herd. One day he noticed his goats acting downright unhinged, jumping, dancing, frolicking like they'd just discovered TikTok. Curious, Kaldi followed them and discovered they'd been nibbling bright red berries from a strange, glossy-leafed shrub. Naturally, he did what anyone would do. He tried them. And boom, Kaldi joins the goat rave. Ecstatic, he brings the berries to a nearby monastery. The monk, naturally suspicious of any teenage goat-based plant discovery, throws the berries into the fire. But then, something odd. The smell. Rich, thick, intoxicating. The scent draws other monks in, and rather than burn it all, they grind the roasted beans, mix them with hot water, and voila, the world's first intentional coffee. Beautiful, right? And probably nonsense. See, historians still argue whether Kaldi ever existed. The earliest known version of his story doesn't appear until the 9th century, after coffee was already a thing. Some even believe the whole tale was invented by Yemeni traders centuries later to create a neat, divine origin story. I mean, who doesn't want their favorite beverage to come with dancing goats? But back in your timeline, no monks, no fire-breathing moralists, just a group of people who figured out something important. When you roast these beans, grind them up, and steep them in boiling water, you don't just stay awake, you remember things. You talk more. You argue louder. You listen longer. In fact, that's the true power of the early Ethiopian brew. It wasn't about wakefulness or productivity, not yet. It was about presence. You stay in the conversation. You stay in the moment. Your body relaxes, but your mind sharpens. It's subtle, like how a candle doesn't do much, but somehow it changes everything. Nearby, a woman leans in and begins telling a story. Something about a lion that turned into a man who turned into mist. You don't understand every word, maybe none at all, but the cadence, the rhythm, the warmth of her voice. It lulls you deeper into your seat. Here's a fun, slightly weird detail in some pockets of Ethiopia, particularly in more remote regions. People still occasionally tell tales of coffee spirits, small, mischievous beings that guard the trees or whisper to the women who roast. Whether that's metaphor or mushroom tea talking, unclear, but it adds a little shimmer to the scene. As the jabina is refilled for a second round, you glance around and notice something strange. Everyone's awake. It's late, and you've been sitting for hours, but nobody's dozing off. The fire is lower now, just soft orange coals. The stars above are smeared with thin clouds, but the people, they're sharp-eyed, engaged. And that's no accident, because even though Chaldee's story might be a bedtime fairy tale, the effects of this drink are very, very real. Caffeine is a stimulant, sure, but it also boosts memory, recall, increases serotonin, and encourages conversation. The early tribes didn't have lab coats or clinical trials, but they knew. That's probably why they kept doing it. It's easy to romanticize ancient times, especially when the fire's warm and the coffee strong, but make no mistake, life here was hard. Crops failed, droughts came, raids happened, sometimes entire villages would vanish. But the ritual, the ceremony of coming together, roasting beans, sharing 3 slow, deliberate cups, that stayed. And here's another scholarly wrinkle to sip on. Some researchers argue that the discovery of coffee wasn't a single moment at all, but rather a centuries-long process of trial, error, and cultural adaptation. Roasting likely came last. Early use may have involved crushing raw beans and mixing them with fats or honey. Others say the leap from food to drink was accidental, maybe even driven by starvation or experimentation during fasting periods. It's the historical equivalent of rummaging through your kitchen and inventing tiramisu by mistake. Your cup is refilled. The second round tastes different, milder, somehow sweeter. Not in flavor, but in mood. The people relax a bit more. The jokes start flowing. Someone behind you lets out a loud snort of laughter. It's contagious. A baby starts crying. No one hushes it. This isn't the kind of place where silence is sacred. It's the noise, the company, the presence that matters. Coffee is just the spark. You sit back, belly warm, eyelids fluttering again. You half expect one of the goats to start tap dancing across the fire pit. But no, it's just the story of Chaldee lingering in your imagination, nuzzling against the smoke. Sure, it's probably made up. But then again, so are most of the best things. And as you cradle your cup, you realize something. In this world of myth and murk, of goats and grinding stones and cups without handles, you're exactly where you need to be. The second cup is almost gone now, and the mood around the fire has shifted. The laughter has mellowed into soft murmurs, and somewhere on the edge of your vision, someone begins to hum, a low, droning melody, part lullaby, part prayer. The night air smells heavier now. The smoke has thickened with the darkening coals, and someone has tossed a pinch of something resinous, frankincense, maybe, into the fire. It curls into the air like a lazy ghost. You lean forward instinctively as a new woman steps into the center of the gathering. She's holding something wrapped in animal hide. It thuds softly when she places it on a low wooden slab. Then she unwraps it, dark powder, almost black, dense, and bitter-smelling. Not quite coffee grounds, this is something older, wilder, cruder. The people around you shift subtly. A few sit taller. A man spits to the side. Not disrespect, just caution. You're not brewing a regular cup anymore. This is something more ceremonial, maybe even a little dangerous. See, the early Oromo tribes of Ethiopia didn't use coffee the way you know it. Not just as a drink, and certainly not as a morning pick-me-up. For them, it had power, ritual, medicinal, maybe even magical. It wasn't always roasted either. Sometimes the berries were ground raw or dried in the sun and pounded into a paste. And that paste, it got rolled into little pellets and consumed before long journeys or tribal gatherings. Energy bites, sure, but also more than that. You watch now as she begins the ritual, spreading the powder in a circle, muttering words too soft to catch. The others echo them, soft, rhythmic, almost like a chant. There's a beat to it, slow, deliberate, like breathing with your ancestors. Fringe theories suggest these early ceremonies had trance elements, that caffeine wasn't just a stimulant, but a way to amplify spiritual states. Think of it like plant-based Wi-Fi connecting people to each other, to nature, to the divine. Historians still argue whether these rituals were religious in the formal sense or simply communal acts dressed in mysticism. But you can feel it in the air now. This is not casual coffee. This is communion. The woman reaches for a small vessel and pours in hot water cooled slightly from the fire, but still steaming. She stirs slowly, murmuring a name, then another. You recognize one. It's the name of someone who died earlier this season. This cup is for them. You sip. Bitter doesn't even cover it. It's like drinking bark and ash and memory, but you drink anyway. Not for the taste, for the meaning. You're not alone. That's the point. The fire pops again, sending a burst of sparks skyward. Someone claps. Another responds with a beat against a drum. The chant rises again, louder now. You find yourself swaying gently, not on purpose, not theatrically, just following the rhythm. It feels natural, like your heartbeat's sinking to something bigger. It's strange, isn't it, that a humble little bean, something so ordinary, could become the centerpiece of sacred ceremony. But that's the thing, ordinary objects take on power when repeated with intent. Roast, grind, pour, sip, repeat, over and over until the motions themselves become meaning. Here's a little-known tidbit to toss into your midnight brain soup. Some early Oromo clans used coffee, not only for energy, but as a kind of binding oath. You drink together, you're tied. Break that bond. You're not just a liar, you're spiritually bankrupt. There's something poetic about that. Forget pinky promises. Try drinking fermented bean mud with someone under a blood moon while reciting the names of your dead uncles. That's commitment. You shift your weight and feel your legs starting to go numb. The mat beneath you is woven tight and scratchy, probably stuffed with dry grass. It rustles slightly as someone sits beside you. A boy, maybe 10. He offers you another cup. No words, just a look that says, "Keep going." You drink again. This one hits differently. There's a depth now and earthiness that wasn't there before. You wonder if it's the brew or if it's you changing. The ceremony around you isn't a show. There's no central stage, no clapping or curtain call, just motion, connection, a kind of shared quiet that wraps itself around you like a blanket. It's not hypnotic, but you're definitely floating. The boy next to you fidgets with a string around his wrist, then leans close to whisper something. You don't understand the words, but the tone is playful. A joke. You both chuckle. There it is again, coffee opening mouths, even when they don't share a language. This is how rituals form. Not with rules, but with rhythm. With little repetitions that make time feel thicker, denser, more alive. And for all the debates in modern scholarship, was it religious or social, medicinal or recreational one, truth stays solid. Coffee brought people together, not just physically, emotionally, psychologically. When the tribes needed to talk, to mourn, to plan, to celebrate, the beans came out. Back at the fire, the final cup is being prepared. The grounds are reused, stretched, diluted, but the meaning deepens. This is the blessing cup. Not just a drink, but a prayer. You cradle it in your palms. It's warm, rough ceramic, heavy with heat. You sip slowly. Outside, a wind rustles through the highland grass. The sky above is thick with stars, too many to count, each one blinking like it knows a secret. You exhale, long, slow, and you feel it again, that strange pulse, the sense that in some impossible way you've been here before. Maybe not you exactly, but someone like you, a person who wandered in, curious and tired, and stayed just long enough to understand that this isn't just a drink. It's a ceremony. It's a map. It's a memory that never quite ends. By the time you set down the last cup, the stars have shifted positions. It's subtle but noticeable, the kind of movement you only catch when you've been very still for a very long time. The fire has burned down to a sleepy amber glow, and the group has thinned a little. Some people have slipped off into huts, others are curled in blankets nearby. But the woman who led the ritual is still awake, still upright, her gaze fixed on the horizon like she's waiting for the sun. And then it hits you. This whole thing, this hours-long coffee journey, isn't just about what you drank. It's about what you didn't. The silence, the space, the waiting. No coffee on the go, no paper cups with plastic lids, no drive-thrus or menu boards, just time, brewed into every cup like an extra ingredient. Now you're curious, how did this slow, meditative experience survive at all in a world obsessed with speed? To understand that, you'll need to hitch a ride mentally at least on the caravan trails that once crisscrossed the Horn of Africa. Picture it: long lines of camels, traders wrapped in flowing robes, jangling gear, sun-cracked lips, and in their satchels, tucked among the frankincense salt blocks and woven textiles, bags of dried coffee beans. At first it traveled as a curiosity, something mysterious, rumored to invigorate warriors, soothe stomachs, or, depending on the trader, cure heartbreak and erectile dysfunction. One of those probably worked better than the other. The traders carried more than goods. They carried stories. And coffee's mythology, already thick with goats and spirits, was fertile ground. Soon the beans made their way into Yemen across the Red Sea, and there something magical happened. The brew met Islam. Now here's where things get really interesting. In the Islamic world, alcohol was, and still is, forbidden. But coffee offered the same social lubricant without the hangover or the moral baggage. And so by the 15th century, you had Sufi mystics in Yemen drinking kahwa, dark bitter, energizing as a tool for their night-long spiritual practices. It kept them alert during chanting and prayer, helping them stay with God through the small hours. Historians still argue whether coffee was originally embraced or simply tolerated by early Muslim leaders. Some say it was viewed with suspicion. After all, anything that altered your state was a theological hot potato. Others insist coffee was seen as a divine gift, a drink of the pious. Either way, it spread like wildfire. Now trace this out with your sleepy imagination. Yemeni port cities alive with ship sails, flapping crates, creaking. The beans moving north through Mecca, Medina, Cairo, and Istanbul. Along the way, something curious happens. Coffee adapts. The beverage changes slightly. The rituals morph. But that core idea, the act of gathering around it, stays the same. Meanwhile, back in Ethiopia, the ceremony you just witnessed didn't vanish. It just stayed rooted, like a stubborn plant refusing to be transplanted. And here's where you get a juicy, lesser-known fact to toss under your pillow. In parts of Ethiopia, especially among rural communities, the coffee ceremony is performed 3 times a day: morning, noon, evening. Each time with 3 separate rounds of brewing: a bowl, the first strongest tona milder, and baraka, the blessing. It's a full-day affair that turns coffee into a kind of sundial for social connection. The very act of preparing it becomes a form of hospitality, even obligation. If someone visits your home, you make coffee, not tea, not juice, coffee. Refusing it would be like slamming the door in someone's face, only ruder and with less caffeine. That's not to say the ceremony hasn't changed over time. In fact, one of the most debated questions among scholars today is whether the modern 3-part ritual has roots in ancient practice, or if it evolved more recently as a cultural identity marker, something to hold on to as Ethiopia modernized. Regardless, it's stuck. And the fact that it has, that's kind of a miracle. You yawn. Not out of boredom, never that, but from the cozy full-body fatigue that only comes from being awake a little too long in a place you don't want to leave. A rooster crows somewhere in the distance, maybe prematurely. You smirk. Even the birds are jumpy after a few cups of jabina brew. Someone nearby is packing up the ceremonial tools. The mortar and pestle, the long-necked pot, the mat where the beans were laid out to dry earlier. Each item is handled carefully, almost like relics. You wonder if the people here think of them that way, if a cracked jabina is just a broken pot or a fallen elder. A warm breeze brushes your cheek. Morning is close now. You can feel it, not just see it. The way the darkness softens around the edges. The way the conversations drop to whispers. The ritual may be over, but its effects linger. And you realize coffee didn't survive because it was strong. It survived because it adapted. Slower in some places, faster in others, sacred here, social there, but always, always present. Like breath, like a heartbeat, like the pulse in your fingertips when you hold a hot cup and feel the world slow down. And that might be the real lesson. It's not about how far coffee traveled, it's about what it carried with it. Patience, community, connection, and just enough caffeine to keep you listening. Dawn breaks so softly you almost miss it. There's no fanfare, no explosion of color, just a gentle lifting of the sky, like someone cracking open the world's eyelid. The breeze picks up. The fire, now just a bed of glowing embers, finally exhales its last puff of warmth. You stretch slowly because your limbs have turned to jelly, and stand. There's a trace of coffee in your blood now. You can feel it not in the hyper way you expect from a double-shot espresso, but as a kind of soft alertness, like your mind has been scrubbed with a velvet sponge. A few villagers are already moving, gathering firewood, feeding chickens, preparing for another day, and as they do, you begin to notice something odd, something small but important. There are no coffee shops. No wooden signs dangling from porches, no baristas shouting orders or scribbling names on cups with aggressive confidence, no milk alternatives, no loyalty cards, no tip jars filled with coins and sarcasm. And yet everyone's drinking coffee. Not just sipping it, living it. You think back to the ceremony, to the careful, deliberate steps, the washing of the beans, the roasting, the rhythm of it all. And then you picture the modern world where people drink coffee the way action heroes reload weapons, fast, loud, barely looking. It's not your fault, of course. You're part of a system that rewards motion over meaning. But still, there's something to mourn in how far coffee has strayed from its roots. And it makes you wonder, how did we go from sacred ritual to venti pumpkin spice on the 405? To answer that, you gotta follow the bean again. This time not on the backs of camels, but in the bellies of ships. The Ottomans had already helped coffee settle into social life across the Islamic world. It had become a staple in coffee houses, places of discussion, storytelling, even low-key rebellion. But in the 17th century, European traders caught wind of the stuff. And let's be real, once the Europeans got involved, you knew things were about to get complicated. Coffee was exotic, mysterious, a little forbidden, everything the upper class loved. Venetian merchants brought it home first. Then came the Dutch, the French, the English. The bean exploded across Europe like a scandal. By the 1650s, coffee houses were popping up in major cities like mushrooms after a storm. London's were especially notorious, rowdy, smoky, full of pamphlet-waving intellectuals and powdered wigs. These weren't places of sacred silence. They were loud, messy, full of half-baked revolutions and terrible poetry. But even then, the ritual persisted, just in new forms. You sip imaginary coffee from an imaginary porcelain cup, now British style with a biscuit and probably some light colonialism. Back in Ethiopia, meanwhile, the traditional ceremony remained almost entirely untouched. It kept its pace, its values, its soul. The world shifted around it, and it said, "No thanks, I'm good." Here's something you probably didn't know in many rural Ethiopian homes. The coffee ceremony isn't just a treat, it's a responsibility. If you host one, you're expected to do it right. Skipping steps, disrespectful. Using pre-ground beans, blasphemy. Trying to rush the third round of brewing, you might as well slap someone's grandmother. And yet, despite this reverence, there's no pretension in the ritual. No exclusivity. Everyone is welcome. Rich or poor, stranger or cousin, it doesn't matter. You show up, you sit down, you drink, you listen, you share, you shut up when it's time to shut up. Historians still argue whether the continuity of the Ethiopian ceremony is due to isolation, cultural pride, or sheer resistance to change. Some suggest it's a mix of all three. Others point to a deep-rooted oral tradition, one that passes ritual knowledge through generations, not by book, but by doing. And here's your quirky tidbit for this stretch of the journey. Some regions even treat spilled coffee as a spiritual omen. Drop your cup during a ceremony. Might be a sign to reflect on your recent decisions. Spill twice. Better make peace with your ancestors. The seriousness of it all is oddly comforting. You're used to coffee being transactional. Here, it's transformational. You look around the village again. Morning has fully arrived. Smoke from fresh cooking fires snakes into the brightening sky. Children chase chickens with the urgent joy of people who don't know what a mortgage is. And off in the distance, you hear it, that unmistakable clink of ceramic on stone. Someone else is starting their brew. You wonder what stories they'll tell this morning. What griefs they'll pour into the steam. What laughter will rise with the smell of roasted beans. Because that's the hidden magic of it all. Coffee in this context is never just coffee. It's a container for memory. A bowl for the soul. Every cup a chance to start over, to say, I'm here. I see you. Let's sit. You stretch again this time, less out of stiffness, more as a quiet celebration of still being upright. Then you take one last look at the heart of this place, at the worn mats, the blackened pot, the tiny clay cups. Simple things, old things, sacred things. And you whisper a promise to yourself. Next time you make coffee, really make it slowly. Intentionally, with silence between the sounds, not because you're expected to, but because someone centuries ago lit a fire and made a cup for you too. The path out of the village crunches softly beneath your feet, still dusted with the fine ash of last night's fire. The sun is higher now, though still gentle, casting long shadows and warming your back like a patient hand. You keep walking slow and meandering with no destination except somewhere slightly different. And as you walk, something lingers. Not just the taste of the coffee, though. Yes, it's still there, smoky and faint on your tongue, but the ritual, the rhythm, the way of it. You realize that the ceremony wasn't just about the drink. It was a container for everything else. Stories, gossip, memory, even grief. Maybe especially grief. You pass by a small homestead. A mother squats beside a shallow hearth roasting beans. Her toddler toddles nearby, dragging a stick through the dirt. She waves unbothered by your outsider face, and you wave back, recognizing the layout instantly. This is the opening act of the coffee ceremony. Even without being invited, you can read the scene like a language you forgot you knew. Here's a wild twist. Coffee in Ethiopia isn't just a beverage or a ritual. In many regions, it's tied to mourning. When someone dies, the bereaved family hosts coffee ceremonies for days, sometimes even weeks. People arrive not with casseroles or flowers, but with time. They sit, they drink, they remember. Nobody says, "Let me know if you need anything." They just show up with their presence and their patience. Historians still debate whether this funereal role of coffee is ancient or relatively recent, maybe emerging as rural life began to fray under the pressures of modernity. Some scholars argue it's a modern evolution of older grief rituals. Others insist it has been this way for centuries, just never documented. Either way, you can see why it's stuck. Because coffee done right slows the world down, and when your heart is broken, the last thing you need is speed. As you walk farther past goats chewing on things they're definitely not supposed to, your mind drifts to the music of the ceremony. Not literal music though. Sometimes women will hum or sing softly while roasting, but the musicality of it, the clinks and sighs, the shh of beans being stirred, the bubble of water, it's like a lullaby for grown-ups. You picture yourself back home, standing over your electric kettle, scrolling your phone while waiting for the water to boil. There's no music there, no ritual, just impatience thinly disguised as productivity. And here's the quirky tidbit for this chapter of our sleepy saga. In some parts of Ethiopia, it's considered unlucky to brew coffee alone, not just rude, unlucky. The belief is that the spirits, call them ancestors, call them echoes, expect to be invited. If you drink coffee by yourself without sharing, you risk upsetting the balance. And trust me, you don't want a cranky ancestral ghost whispering passive-aggressive comments into your latte foam. You reach a wide clearing now. A few teenagers are sitting under a scraggly tree, passing around a steaming cup. They laugh, then grow serious, then laugh again. You don't understand their language, but you don't need to. Coffee is the caption. It's hard to imagine a time when the world didn't have this drink, when the plant was just another wild shrub growing unnoticed on the cool slopes of the Ethiopian highlands, and yet there was such a time, pre-goat, pre-mystic, pre-ceremony. And here's the thing, nobody really tells you. Coffee didn't immediately conquer the world. It wasn't love at first sip. There were stumbles, resistance, entire religious leaders calling it the devil's drink, rulers who banned it, uprisings that started in coffee houses. It was dangerous in the way ideas are dangerous. People gathered around it and started thinking, too much. But in Ethiopia, it was always more sacred than seditious. You remember the 3 brews of Boltona Baraka. First, strong and biting. Second, mellow. Third, a whisper. It's not a caffeine thing. It's a metaphor. Life is like that too. Starts bold, softens, ends with a blessing if you're lucky. You sit now on a rock that might as well be a throne. A breeze rustles the leaves. Somewhere behind you, a child laughs. A pot clinks. Beans tumble. The cycle continues. And you realize there's no real separation between mourning and celebration here, between joy and grief. They both fit inside the same ceremony. One cup for sorrow, one for gratitude, one for peace. Nothing rushed, nothing wasted. It's almost funny, isn't it? That in a world obsessed with productivity, the most meaningful things happen unproductively, slowly, repetitively, without a finish line. You don't win a coffee ceremony, you don't finish it and shout, "Achievement unlocked." You just sit, you listen, you sip, and eventually when the world feels a little softer, you get up. Before you do though, here's one last morsel for your brain to chew on before it drifts into dreamland. Some Ethiopian communities believe that the aroma of roasting coffee beans can summon guests, not metaphorically, literally, like a fragrant beacon. The smell wafts out, hooks itself into the memory of anyone nearby, and pulls them in. No need for a phone call. The coffee calls you. You look up now as if expecting someone to answer that call. No one does. Just birds circling. A donkey brays in the distance, clearly unimpressed by your emotional moment. Still, you smile. Because whether you're sipping in silence or mourning someone you loved, whether you're surrounded by friends or utterly alone, the coffee ceremony makes space for all of it. It doesn't fix grief, but it doesn't run from it either. And maybe that's the real power. The trail dips, now winding through a grove of eucalyptus trees that rustle like whispered gossip. The air cools a bit sharper than before, as if the land itself is exhaling, and with every step you feel the weight of the last section settling in your chest, not heavy, not sad, just solid, like a stone in your pocket that reminds you where you've been. You pass a shepherd and his flock. He nods, you nod. It's an unspoken exchange of mutual acknowledgement, like, yes, we are both here in this weirdly timeless place, sharing oxygen. No coffee passes between you, but the connection still hums low and familiar. It's the kind of moment that makes you think about space, not the outer kind with stars and black holes, but the kind you make in your day for things that matter. And let's be real, modern life isn't exactly built for ceremonial anything. Your phone pings, your inbox multiplies like gremlins in a rainstorm. Even your smartwatch gently bullies you to move every hour. So where does that leave the coffee ceremony? This is where things get complicated. Because in urban Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa for example, the pace is picking up. People have jobs, schedules, commutes. They don't always have time for full 3-round ceremonies every morning, so they adapt. You stumble into one such adaptation now, a little roadside shack with a tin roof and hand-painted sign. The scent hits you before anything else: roasted beans, charcoal, maybe a hint of incense. Inside, a woman stands behind a low table. She's wearing a bright patterned scarf and a look that says she's already seen too much today. She pours coffee quickly, efficiently, but not without grace. There's a rhythm to her movement, a muscle memory of tradition condensed for urban life. Welcome to the Bunabet, the modern Ethiopian coffee house. These bunabets are scattered across the city like lifelines. You'll find them in markets and alleyways next to barber shops and tire repair stalls. They're small, often cobbled together from wood and tarpaulin, but always alive, always buzzing. And though they lack the long, meditative stillness of rural ceremonies, they hold onto the essence. A neighbor walks up, then another. Soon it's a crowd. Not a formal invitation, but something subtler. The coffee is brewing, and that means you stop even for 5 minutes. You sip. You say hello. You ask about the day, the weather, someone's sick uncle. It's a kind of ritual triage, shortened yes, but not shallow. Historians still argue whether these urban bunabets are preserving the ceremony or eroding it. Is the ritual evolving, or is it slowly being hollowed out by the pressures of city life? Some call it ceremonial shrinkage. Others see it as proof that culture, when cared for, can bend without breaking. You sit on a plastic stool handed a tiny cup by a teenage girl who's clearly inherited her mother's no-nonsense attitude. The coffee is strong. No sugar this time. It jolts your spine a little, like a stern friend telling you to get it together. And here's your fringe detail. Some urban bunabets add burning frankincense to their ceremonies, not for religious reasons, but to create a sensory atmosphere, like diffusing essential oils, but with a sacred twist. The smell clings to your clothes. You kinda love it. The conversation around you is fast overlapping. Someone's arguing about soccer. Another is complaining about bus fares. A woman nearby tells a story about a cousin who saw a hyena in broad daylight, which apparently means something, though you're not sure what. You laugh anyway. And that's the thing, it still works. Even when rushed. Even when crammed between errands. The coffee still opens the gate. The ritual still flickers in the noise. You think about your own city now. The cafes with exposed brick and Edison bulbs. The menu boards that read like Mad Lib's mushroom-infused oat cortado with reishi dust. You wonder how many people sit in those spaces and actually connect the way these folks are connecting here. The bunabet owner catches your eye and smiles. Not because she wants a tip. Not because she's trained in customer service, but because that's what you do here. You see people. You get up nodding thanks. Your cup clinks gently on the tin tray. No receipt. No transaction. Just the residue of presence. Outside, the city noise picks back up. Honking, barking, laughter, life. You step back into it not with dread, but with something calmer curling behind your ribs. The ceremony, even this tiny, fast-forwarded version, has done its job. And before you get too philosophical about it, let's throw in one more oddball fact. In some neighborhoods, bunabets will hang a bunch of fresh grass on the ground or the table as part of the setup. Symbolic greenery. A nod to the outdoors, to fertility, to abundance. It's a blink and you'll miss it tradition, but it's there, rooted, persistent. You pause at the next street corner watching a woman balance a basket of beans on her head. A taxi zips by honking like a jazz solo. Life pulses fast here, but coffee slows it, even if only in micro doses. And maybe that's the lesson of this whole urban detour. The ritual isn't a fossil. It's not locked in some museum guarded by velvet ropes and dusty curators. It's alive, adaptable, sometimes wearing sweatpants. You don't have to roast the beans yourself over a fire pit. You don't have to chant or bow or sprinkle magic herbs unless you really want to. But you can pause, you can share, you can listen while the kettle hums. Because in the end, ceremony isn't about steps, it's about space. The kind you make, the kind you hold, the kind you offer. And somewhere in that space, no matter how brief, the coffee becomes more than coffee again. Your feet carry you out of the city without much conscious effort, just a quiet pull away from the asphalt pulse and back toward the dirt paths and open skies. You move slower now, not from fatigue, but from the odd feeling that you're stretching yourself across two worlds at once. One foot in the ancient ceremony, the other in the modern bunabet. And somewhere in between there's you, half-dreamer, half-time traveler, fully caffeinated. It's a strange thing to feel nostalgic for something you never lived, but that's what's brewing in your chest as you reach a quiet hillside, where old stones mark the edge of what was once a monastic retreat. Not a building in sight anymore, just ruins, bones of stone, and the wind pushing grass in long sighs. Here's where it gets interesting. Many early Ethiopian monasteries helped preserve and elevate the coffee ceremony. Monks, after all, are pros at routines. You'd expect them to be the quiet morning tea types, but nope, turns out a great number were all in on coffee long before the West got its jittery hands on it. The story goes that these monastics recognized something sacred in the preparation of the drink, something that mirrored their own contemplative practices. The roasting, the grinding, the slow pour, it all lent itself to focus, to repetition, to prayer. Some sources even suggest monks brewed coffee to stay awake during long nights of chanting and study, centuries before European scholars did the same. Historians still argue whether the first religious use of coffee in Ethiopia was monastic or rooted in older animist traditions. Some claim the monks adopted it from the people. Others say the people picked it up from the monks. Classic chicken or coffee bean scenario. You step over a moss-covered rock shaped suspiciously like a deflated beanbag and sit. The sun is soft here, filtered through haze. It feels like you've slipped into a lull between centuries. Now picture this, a row of monks' heads bowed, cradling hot clay cups. The air is thick with incense and the aroma of coffee. The silence isn't empty, it's full of meaning, full of caffeine. One monk chuckles at a thought you'll never hear. Another sighs deeply, not out of stress, but out of satisfaction, that this is enough kind of sigh. Even now, some monasteries in Ethiopia continue this tradition. Hidden high in the mountains or tucked along forested slopes, these places keep the ceremony alive, not for guests or tourists, but for themselves. It's part of their rhythm. Prayer work, rest coffee, repeat. And speaking of quirky details, a few monastic orders believe that coffee properly blessed could aid in spiritual clarity. Not quite a magic potion, but a helper on the path to enlightenment. Forget vision quests and burning bushes. Sometimes epiphanies smell like burnt sugar and earth. You lie back in the grass, arms spread out like a lazy starfish, and stare up at the clouds. There's a story, fringe, yes, but too good to ignore, that claims one Ethiopian abbot had such vivid dreams after his nightly brew that he wrote down entire prophecies, most of which involved oddly specific harvest predictions and warnings against gambling with hyenas. Probably not peer-reviewed, but hey, dream big. The thing that sticks with you, though, is how intentional it all is. Whether it's a monk, a grandmother, a street vendor, or a shepherd, the ceremony slows them down, centers them, and maybe that's the sacred part, not the drink, but the doing. You roll onto your side, brushing off bits of grass, and think about how rarely your own days feel that way. Intentional. You're more of a multitasking tornado, checking emails while brushing your teeth and mentally composing grocery lists during phone calls. The idea of doing just one thing fully feels almost rebellious. But here in this imagined monastery, one cup at a time is enough. Down the hill, a boy is collecting firewood. He's young, maybe 9, but he moves with the precision of someone who knows exactly how much wood his mother will need to roast the beans. Not too little, not too much. Just right. You wonder if he knows he's part of something ancient. Probably not. He's just doing chores. But it's there in his hands, the unbroken chain. Another fringe note, just for flavor, in some rural Ethiopian legends it's said that if you prepare coffee with a distracted mind, thinking angry thoughts or telling lies, the brew will come out bitter no matter how perfect the beans. It's a superstition, sure, but also kind of poetic. You sit up and imagine your own version of a coffee monastery. Maybe it's a cozy studio apartment where you shut off your phone and light a candle before boiling the water. Maybe it's a park bench where you pour from a thermos and actually taste your coffee instead of chugging it. Ceremony doesn't need robes, just awareness. One last image before we drift. There's an old bell hanging from a crooked tree branch nearby. Maybe once it called monks to prayer. Maybe it just scared off birds. Either way, it catches the breeze and rings soft and uneven. You imagine someone long ago sipping their final round of coffee Baraka the blessing cup while that bell rang in the distance. They didn't rush. They didn't check their watch. They sat, listened, breathed. And then, when the time came, they stood and walked back to whatever waited beyond the monastery walls. You close your eyes, let the wind settle. For now, nothing waits. Just the story still unfolding. You don't walk so much as float now, like someone who's spent just a little too long in a hot bath. Limbs loose, thoughts drifting. The road curls gently under your feet, lined by acacia trees that lean just enough to form a whispering archway overhead. Sunlight filters through like gold dust, and your only job is to follow it forward. Ahead, a cluster of huts round thatched and humming with quiet energy comes into view. Not a village exactly, more like a family compound. And you're just in time. A coffee ceremony is beginning. Here's where things start to shimmer with symbolism. The setup is almost theatrical, but not in a staged kind of way, more like ritual choreography performed with absolute conviction. You're ushered in, given a seat close enough to smell the grass that's been scattered across the floor. Yes, grass again. Remember the urban Bunabet's tiny green patch? This is the source. Fresh cut, lush, and laid down like a living carpet to welcome the spirits of warmth, fertility, and hospitality. Then there's the incense swirling in smoky ribbons from a tiny clay burner. It curls around your face like a sleepy cat. The scent is hard to place: frankincense, myrrh, eucalyptus, dipped in memory. Either way, it doesn't just mask odors, it reorients your entire nervous system. Goodbye stress. Goodbye to-do lists. You're not in Kansas anymore. And now comes the jabina, the clay pot you've seen before, but never like this. It's placed at the center of a wide, low tray, surrounded by cups that have been polished to a mother's shine. The hostess moves, like she's in slow motion, deliberate, unhurried, sacred. You're not watching a performance. You're watching belief in motion. But the part that really glows, like actually shines a little under the sun, is the symbolism. The ceremony isn't just about serving drinks. It's a layered offering. Each round of coffee, 3 in total, has a different meaning. The first able is the strongest, the initiation, the wake-up call. It's the truth serum of the bunch. Conversations here tend to be more formal, respectful, grounded in mutual curiosity. You sip this one with your spine straight and your ears open. Then comes Tona, the second cup. Slightly lighter, a little softer. This is where jokes begin, gossip flows, laughter bubbles up like foam at the top of a fresh pour. The group starts to loosen. Posture sags, legs stretch. Someone teases their cousin about a donkey-related mishap from 5 years ago. The heat of the day melts into something social, something shared. Finally, Baraka the blessing cup, the gentle goodbye. Not everyone makes it to this round, but you do. Lucky you. This final brew is symbolic of peace, unity, and abundance. It's a quiet prayer disguised as a drink. And even if your brain isn't fully fluent in the tradition, your body understands it. This is closure. Ceremony bookends. Historians still argue whether these 3 rounds evolved from spiritual numerology or from practical brewing economics. Some say it mirrors the Christian Trinity, others claim it's just about extracting maximum flavor from a small handful of beans. Both might be true. That's the thing with oral traditions, truth hides in the margins. Your host explains this with a smile and a flick of the wrist, tossing a few additional beans onto the fire. They pop like tiny fireworks. She fans the jabina, gently coaxing the steam upward like it's sacred breath. And here's your fringe detail in some regions, especially among the Oromo people. The coffee ceremony is linked to rites of passage, births, deaths, betrothals. It becomes more than a habit, it's a social contract. Refusing to attend or participate, not just rude, potentially scandalous. Think of it like skipping your best friend's wedding and ghosting their texts afterward. You sip, listen, laugh when they laugh even if you don't catch the punchline. The hostess's daughter brings out Kolo roasted barley, sometimes peanuts. You crunch it between sips, the savory contrast, making the coffee even smoother. You're in now, not just as a visitor, but as a participant. And here comes the best part: silence. Not awkward, not pregnant, just full. A shared stillness. Everyone looks at the coffee, the fire, the horizon. No one reaches for a phone. No one rushes to wrap things up. The ceremony is the clock here. You exist inside it, not against it. You close your eyes for a second, and in the dark, behind your eyelids, everything sharpens. You see the layers: fire, bean breath cup, hand, voice. The slow machinery of human connection, well-oiled and ancient, like a lullaby made of smoke and sweetness. You're snapped back by a sneeze. The toddler across from you has been huffing the incense a little too enthusiastically. His mom scoops him up with a laugh. The group chuckles. Even the fire seems to giggle. And here's the thought that lands like a feather on your shoulder. This ceremony doesn't need preservation. It doesn't cling to the past in desperation. It thrives because it meets something timeless in people, the need to mark time with meaning. Like birthdays, like funerals, like your weird habit of rewatching the same sitcom every time you feel overwhelmed. Ritual isn't quaint, it's anchoring. The fire dims. The jabina is empty. The host pours a final splash of water onto the coals, sending up one last cloud of fragrant steam. Baraka. The blessing lingers in the air like a whisper you can't quite hear but definitely feel. Something like, you were here. You were part of this. And that matters. You rise slowly, joints creaking in protest, but your soul soothed. You offer thanks in the few words you know, and it's enough. One of the elders pats your shoulder as if to say, you did well. No translations needed. As you walk away, the breeze shifts. The scent of burnt grass, roasted bean, and something sacred trails behind you like a thread tied to your collarbone. You don't need to look back. It'll stay with you. Now let's see where the road takes you next. The dirt path snakes downward, now lazily curling like a contented cat around the base of a hill. The shadows stretch longer, softer, the kind that fall gently rather than looming. You adjust your stride, let your pace slow to match the rhythm of the land. Your shoes wait. Did you take them off at some point? Are dusty, your soles warm from the earth's own quiet hum. You follow the sound of laughter. It pulls you toward the outskirts of a village market. No signs, no neon, just the intuitive sprawl of cloth-covered stalls, open baskets of spices and bundles of herbs that look like they might cure heartbreak, or at least bad breath. The air is heavy with scent, coriander, garlic, rain-damp wood, and coffee. Always coffee. But this time it's different. You're watching the ceremony evolve, stretch, twist, and shape itself around commerce. See, somewhere between the monastic hills and the backyard gatherings, Ethiopian coffee ceremonies found another stage, the marketplace. Not just the literal markets, but the broader idea of trade exchange, barter, and adaptation. Coffee became both ritual and revenue. You duck under a low awning, past two older women arguing lovingly, but with volume over the proper way to layer green grass under the jabina station. One of them huffs and waves you over, offering a low stool that's been through at least 5 decades of guests, if the wobble is any clue. And here's the twist. Today, the ceremony isn't just about community, it's about business. Hosting a proper coffee service has become a marker of reputation. Especially in towns and trading centers, the quality of a family's or a stall's coffee ceremony often tells visitors everything they need to know: cleanliness, hospitality, prosperity. It's Yelp, but with more incense and 0 typos. Historians still argue whether this market-based ceremonial coffee evolved as a natural extension of trade routes or whether it was a strategic cultural display aimed at impressing traveling merchants. Maybe both. Maybe the ceremony just knew how to hustle. You sit and listen as the beans hit the pan. The sound is less sizzle and more pop, 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 like little fists knocking to be let into the world. The hostess fans the smoke with a palm leaf, her movements fluid and practiced like someone conducting a silent orchestra. Quirky tidbit for this round. In some towns, the aroma of a well-roasted coffee batch is considered an informal advertisement. Women will roast beans near the roadside not just for themselves, but as a way to attract customers to their stalls, homes, or services. Like baking cookies during an open house, but more aromatic and a little more mystical. And it works. You, a fully caffeinated wanderer, are drawn like a moth to the warmth of the Jabina fire. The entire market seems to pivot around it. Merchants pause mid-sale to grab a quick cup. A traveling musician stops strumming his masenko just long enough to sip and nod in approval. Even a goat, yes again, with the goat's lingers nearby, eyes half-lidded as if contemplating starting its own cafe. This fluid, ever-adapting role of the coffee ceremony is a kind of genius. It bridges old and new. It respects tradition while knowing how to flirt with modern life. People gather not just to reflect or socialize, but to network trade stories or pitch a new idea over the abol round. And coffee's role in Ethiopian commerce runs deeper still. For centuries, it's been one of the country's most vital exports. Farmers cultivate heirloom varietals that other nations only dream of growing. The beans carry names like Yirgacheffe, Sidamo Harar, names whispered reverently in third-wave coffee shops around the world, printed on chalkboard menus next to oat milk options and existential dread. But here those same beans aren't exotic. They're local, family-grown, dried on woven mats behind the house, washed in spring water, picked by people who know which trees have the most attitude. And when the time comes, those beans re-enter the ceremony, completing the loop. Earth to hand, hand to flame, flame to cup, cup to you. The ceremony finishes with a round of Tona the social cup. A few merchants lean in, telling tales half true and fully hilarious. One swears he once saw a monkey steal a sack of coffee and set up its own trading stall. Another claims a bag of beans was once cursed, causing a man to fall in love with a hyena. Laughter rolls through the air, thick and honest. You wipe your hands on your knees, nod along, even add a laugh of your own. Not because you understand every word, but because laughter speaks its own fluent dialect. When Baraka arrives, you feel it, not just as a drink, but as a signal. The ceremony, even in the chaotic swirl of a market, still knows how to close a chapter with grace. The hostess pours the last cup with a kind of quiet pride. Around you, the market buzz picks up again. Baskets lifted, disputes reignited, songs resumed. But for one breathless minute, the world was a ceremony, a story told in heat and herb and steam. You stand bow slightly part, instinct, part habit now, and offer thanks. She waves you off with a wink and a word that sounds like it might mean go in peace or maybe don't trip over the goat. As you step back into the crowd, the colors seem brighter. The reds of the fabrics, the shine of metal pans, the green of hanging herbs. Maybe it's the caffeine. Maybe it's you tuning in differently now. You're not just passing through these ceremonies anymore. You're absorbing them. Like the beans in the pan, you're being roasted gently by time and tradition until something richer emerges. Another step, another booth, another waft of incense, and somewhere just ahead, another Jabina waiting. You veer off the main road now, ducking beneath a lattice of vines heavy with unripe fruit. The landscape opens into a quieter, looser sprawl farm country. The sounds of chatter and bartering fade behind you, replaced by chirping crickets, a few disgruntled chickens, and the rhythmic tap of someone sweeping a dirt yard with a bundle of dried reeds. And there on a shaded porch, an older woman sits, cradling a jabina in her lap like a sleepy pet. She's not brewing, not yet, just waiting, letting the pot warm in the sun, or maybe just enjoying the weight of it in her hands. You nod a hello. She nods back. No words, no rush. You're entering a different kind of ceremony now, one shaped by age, memory, and intergenerational storytelling. Coffee here isn't just a beverage. It's a bridge between what was and what still is, carried carefully by elders who've performed this ritual more times than they've counted birthdays. Inside the house, you hear the slow shuffle of slippers. A grandchild peeks around the door, then disappears again. The scent of freshly washed cotton hangs in the air, shirts drying on a line swaying like soft flags of peace. And underneath it all, always coffee. Not brewing yet, but expected. Like a dinner guest you don't bother knocking for anymore. You sit, wait, observe. And finally the preparation begins, not with a bang, but with a whisper. The woman's hands are gnarled, strong, elegant, in that specific way only age can grant. She reaches for the beans, sun-dried and stored in a large woven basket. She pours them into a small pan, blows away the husks with a soft puff of breath, and places them over a charcoal burner. And then she hums, low and soft, more vibration than tune. It might be a lullaby, or a prayer, or maybe just a melody from somewhere deep in her childhood. The sound wraps around the moment like a scarf. You realize this is less a performance and more a private ceremony you've somehow been allowed to witness. You learn quickly not to ask questions here. Not yet. This kind of ceremony unfolds on its own time. The mainstream history part. Here's a gem. Elders, especially women, have long served as stewards of cultural knowledge in Ethiopian communities. Oral historians, herbalists, midwives, peacekeepers. And the coffee ceremony, one of their most potent tools for transmitting memory. This isn't just sentimental, it's practical. Sitting with coffee is how children hear stories of their great-grandparents. It's where disputes between siblings quietly resolve. It's where life's jagged edges get smoothed over with steam and shared laughter. The beans begin to crackle. The woman glances toward the door, and soon another figure joins the porch. A teenage girl, maybe 15, sits with her knees drawn to her chest. She starts fidgeting with the edge of her dress, clearly impatient, but she doesn't interrupt. She's learning. Coffee here is an inheritance, passed down not in a will, but in weekly repetition. Every pour, every stir, every silent pause teaches patience, respect, and presence. You can't shortcut this. You have to live it. Quirky side note. Some elders will test a young person's readiness for adulthood by having them prepare an entire ceremony from scratch, roast, grind, brew, serve. If you mess it up, you hear about it for years. One infamous uncle reportedly wrote a family song mocking his niece's weak bowl. Harsh, maybe. Memorable, absolutely. And you begin to notice each motion, each step is a kind of mnemonic device. Grind clockwise, not counterclockwise. Pour the water slowly like it's expensive. Place the cups in a half moon, never a straight line. The coffee isn't just the goal, it's the teacher. Historians still argue whether these ceremonial motions began as utilitarian steps or if they were always meant to encode deeper lessons about community hierarchy and etiquette. Either way, the meaning is there now, as clear as steam rising from a freshly poured tona. The girl reaches for the cups. The elder corrects her hand placement gently without speaking. The girl adjusts, nods, progress. You sip your cup, and even in this quiet, almost invisible ritual, you taste layers. Not just of flavor, though, yes, it's excellent, but of wisdom, of time, of weathered fingertips and childhood songs. And the stories start. Not dramatic ones, just slow tales about harvests that went sideways, about uncles who danced too much, about a cow that once wandered into a wedding. The teenage girl giggles. You chuckle too. The elder, she just sips. Because for her, these aren't punchlines, they're heirlooms. And here's the subtle brilliance of the elders' approach. They don't explain the ceremony, they embody it. The coffee becomes a delivery system for values, patience, listening, gratitude. You can't microwave that into a TED Talk. Another quirky layer: in some households, elders will use the coffee ceremony to predict the weather, relationships, even illness. Not quite fortune-telling, but close. They'll watch the bubbles in the pot, the way the steam curls, the timing of the crackle. If that jabina starts singing too early, rain's coming. If the first pour overflows, someone's keeping a secret. Science would roll its eyes. But the elders, they've lived enough seasons to earn the benefit of the doubt. The final cup comes around Baraka again, but here it feels heavier. It's not just about blessing, it's about continuity. The girl pours it carefully now. The elder watches. Her nod this time is almost imperceptible. You drink, and as you stand to leave, something unexpected happens. The elder takes your hand. She holds it a moment like she's feeling your pulse or your story. She doesn't speak, just presses something into your palm, a single coffee bean. It's smooth and warm from her pocket. You don't need words to know what it means. You tuck it away, thank her. Walk barefoot off the porch, feeling the earth between your toes like it's part of the ceremony too. The sky above glows with late afternoon. Somewhere a rooster crows out of rhythm. The girl's laugh echoes behind you, and the elder's hum resumes so faint you almost believe you imagined it. But you didn't. You move forward, carrying a memory that isn't quite yours, but has somehow become part of you anyway. You follow a path that barely qualifies as one more an idea of a trail than a solid invitation. It winds through low brush, past trees that seem to lean in conspiratorially, their bark etched with decades of wind and whispered gossip. The air is changing again, cooler now, with a sweet edge that reminds you of wet clay and crushed jasmine. There's a hush here, not silence exactly, but the kind of quiet that asks you to lower your voice and slow your thoughts. The scenery thins, and then like a trick of the eye, you find yourself at the edge of a monastery. Not the towering kind with gold domes and rigid silence. This one is squat and stone-built, draped in vines and surrounded by ancient trees that clearly had seniority before the first foundation stone was ever laid. It's quiet, but lived in. Chickens scratch beneath a fig tree. A monk kneels in the garden, coaxing life from stubborn soil. There's a well in the center of the courtyard, its pulley creaking gently as a young novice draws up water. And off to the side, on a low stool by a flickering charcoal burner, sits a monk with a jabina, of course. Because here coffee isn't just tradition or economy or hospitality, it's part of the divine rhythm. You step closer, slow and careful, as if not to disturb the delicate spiritual frequency hovering in the air. The monk looks up, nods with the kind of calm that seems to ripple out in waves. He doesn't gesture for you to sit. He doesn't have to. The empty stool next to him is already waiting. The ceremony begins again. But this time, it feels like a different universe altogether. Monasteries like this one have been centers of Ethiopian Christian life for over a millennium. And within these walls, the coffee ceremony has taken on a meditative, almost liturgical role. Not every monastery does it the same way, but many include coffee as part of their daily rhythm: preparation at dawn, a break at mid-morning, another round in the quiet hush before sunset. And it's not just monks. Nuns too carry the practice with reverence. Some even grow their own heirloom coffee trees within cloistered gardens, tucked between rosemary bushes and fig saplings, as if the beans themselves were cloistered novices. You watch as the monk roasts the beans slowly, methodically. His fingers are steady, his focus absolute. No distractions. Not even the flutter of a bird nearby pulls his eyes away. It's like watching someone paint a mandala with heat and scent. Mainstream historical tidbit incoming, some of the earliest written mentions of coffee consumption in Ethiopia appear in monastic records, where it's noted as a stimulant to help monks stay awake during long nighttime prayers. Move over energy drinks, this was the original all-nighter potion. But there's a fringe theory too. Some believe that the monks didn't just use coffee to stay alert. They believed the plant had mystical properties. That the beans, when properly prepared and consumed in sacred silence, opened the heart to deeper prayer, richer visions, and even contact with the divine. A spiritual espresso shot, basically. You sip your bowl the first round, and even though you've tasted it a dozen times already on this journey, something about it here feels quieter. Not muted, just more internal. Like the flavor is whispering to you instead of shouting. The monk doesn't speak, but somehow you feel the ceremony telling its own story. And here's something odd and lovely. This coffee moment, this ceremony, is not for hospitality. It's not to entertain or impress or comfort. It's to align, to mark the shift between tasks, to pause time, to remember the breath. Historians still argue whether monastic coffee ceremonies influenced broader Ethiopian coffee culture or merely mirrored what was already happening in villages. Some say the monks refined it. Others believe the people taught the monks. But the overlap is undeniable, and in this quiet courtyard, you don't need a timeline to see how deeply the roots are intertwined. Another quirky nugget: in a few particularly old monasteries, it's said that monks would listen to the bubbles in the jabina as part of their contemplative practice. Not for weather predictions like the grandmothers did, but for messages, a kind of sacred resonance. Some even composed hymns based on the rhythm of the boil. Imagine Gregorian chant inspired by coffee steam. Now that's a Spotify playlist we need. The second round tona is poured. You accept it with both hands as the monk subtly demonstrates. No talking still, just sipping and thinking and listening. Something about this place, this ceremony, strips away the excess. The market chatter, the village laughter, even the arguments over who roasted better, it all fades. What's left is heat, breath, silence, and steam. Time folds here. You could be in the 10th century or yesterday afternoon. The coffee grounds don't care. They swirl in the bottom of your cup like runes, like anchors. The monk rises, disappears into a stone alcove, and returns with incense. He lights it and places it beside the jabina. The smoke curls upward like a second offering. And here's the part that might surprise you: there's no sermon, no chant, just the sound of bubbling water, the gentle clink of ceramic cups, and the occasional creak of a nearby fig tree stretching in the breeze. You reach the third cup, baraka, the blessing, and this time it feels less like a farewell and more like a benediction, a subtle sacred punctuation mark at the end of a prayer you didn't realize you were speaking. You rise, bow your head slightly. The monk returns the gesture, presses one hand to his heart. As you step out of the courtyard, the sun hits your shoulders like warm cloth. You turn once, look back. The monk is already cleaning the jabina, steam rising like breath from a dragon's nose. You walk forward again, down the winding path lined with old cypress trees, each one shaped by centuries of wind. The silence stays with you, not empty, but full, like a pocket you've just discovered inside yourself. You won't remember every detail of this ceremony. You're not supposed to, but you will remember how it felt like being part of a hymn written in heat and earth and patience. The landscape widens. A stream gurgles nearby. A goat bleats in the distance because of course. But your footsteps now carry the quiet of monks, the patience of grandmothers, the welcome of strangers, all stirred into the dark swirl at the bottom of a small ceramic cup. You descend from the hill's feet, crunching on gravel, warmed by afternoon sun. The monastery is behind you, its calm still echoing faintly in your chest. But as you reach flatter ground again, you sense the rhythm shifting. A subtle uptick. Laughter here has a sharper edge. Smells are ruddier: goat stew, wood smoke, sweat, something vaguely like cardamom, and regret. The village you approach isn't rural quiet. It's scrappy. It pulses with life and that particular brand of organized chaos known only to neighborhoods stitched together with hope and tin roofs. This is the domain of the working poor, farmers, weavers, day laborers, merchants of goods that may or may not have fallen off a cart. And yet, even here, in the dusty hum of survival, the coffee ceremony holds. You duck under a hanging bedsheet turned sunshade, and there in a cramped courtyard, you spotted a woman hunched over a brazier coaxing flames like they owe her money. A jabina rests nearby. A half-dozen plastic stools ring the fire, none matching. A kid kicks a soccer ball against a cracked wall. A radio plays a warbly pop song with no discernible melody. Somehow the scene holds together. And just like that, you're invited. Not formally, not with words. A teenager waves you over with a head nod so smooth it deserves its own drumbeat. You sit, the stool wobbles. You plant your feet and grin like you've always belonged here. Because this is street-level ceremony. Still sacred, still layered with meaning, but stripped of all pretense. Here's your mainstream historical fact: the Ethiopian coffee ceremony isn't limited by class. It's one of the rare cultural practices observed across social strata. From mountain hermits to urban bankers, everyone respects it. Even in shanty towns and bustling roadside cafes, the ritual persists, not diluted, just adapted. And the adaptation? It's genius. That woman by the fire. She doesn't have a hand-carved wooden tray or ceremonial incense. She's got a chipped plastic basin for washing the cups and an old sardine can for scooping charcoal. But she moves with the same precision as any aristocrat. You can tell she's done this dance 1,000 times, and she doesn't miss a step. The beans roast in a battered pan darker than most. You watch as she stirs with a long spoon, letting the aroma rise like smoke signals. People start to gather, a man with his shirt open halfway, 2 young girls with mango-stained hands, a hunched grandmother who mutters to herself but takes the best stool without apology. Then someone calls out a joke, something about donkeys and marriage you don't quite catch, and the entire courtyard erupts in laughter. You don't get the punchline, but the joy is infectious. Your cheeks ache from grinning. The woman smirks and gives a theatrical sigh like you people again, but keeps roasting. Fringe tidbit time in some Ethiopian neighborhoods, the local coffee host, often a woman known for her skills, becomes a kind of low-level community therapist. People come not just for caffeine, but for news, emotional triage, matchmaking advice, and a little gentle meddling. If you haven't cried at one of her coffee sessions, are you even a member of the block? You sip your ball. It's bold, unapologetic, strong enough to wake a bear in hibernation. Someone shouts about the soccer match. 2 kids start arm wrestling with intense focus. A guy in a torn Real Madrid jersey tries to flirt with one of the girls, who promptly laughs in his face and steals his cup. And through it all, the coffee keeps coming. The second round tona is poured with less formality, now more like a friendly shove than a gentle offering. But it still matters. You feel it. That grounding, that recentering. Historians still argue whether the informal ceremonies of city alleys and working-class homes represent a dilution or evolution of the ritual. Some purists say these adaptations erode the sanctity. Others argue this is where coffee lives most authentically among people who need its comfort the most. Your vote. You side with the mango-handed girls, because here, every pore says you belong. Not because of your title or wealth or invitation, but because you're here, present, holding a cup. Another quirky note. In tight-knit neighborhoods, it's considered an act of serious shade to hold a coffee ceremony and not invite your immediate neighbors. People will notice, they'll talk. Passive-aggressive remarks will be made at the communal laundry station. Social cohesion. Thy name is Jebena. You reach the 3rd round baraka, and this time it really feels like a benediction of a different sort. Not divine exactly, but urban, gritty. The blessing of you survived another day, friend. Drink this and laugh about it. You raise your cup toward the woman by the fire. She nods once, then yells at a child to stop poking the chicken with a broom. It's somehow the perfect ending. And now you rise, brushing dust from your legs, and weave back through the alley. The soccer ball rolls past your feet. The girls wave. The grandmother mutters something and cackles to herself. The noise stays behind, but the feeling follows. Because you realize something as you step into the late-day sun, the coffee ceremony doesn't just exist in different places. It changes shape to fit them. It stretches contracts, adapts, but never loses its essence. Whether robed in incense or framed by laundry lines, it holds you, anchors you, welcomes you. And there at the edge of the alley, a man offers you a ride on his rickety motorcycle. You hesitate. He says you heading toward the river. You nod. He hands you a helmet that probably hasn't passed a safety inspection since 1972, and you hop on, because the story's not done. Not yet. The motorcycle coughs, sputters, and roars reluctantly to life. You speed off into the dusk, clutching the sides of your seat with one hand and the ghost of a smile with the other. Behind you, plastic stools, laughter, and the sacred clang of lived-in survival. Ahead of you, the river, and the next cup. You're clinging to the back of a motorcycle that may or may not have its original brakes, rattling toward the river valley with the wind slapping your cheeks like it's personally offended by your lack of protective gear. The rider hums something tuneless, one hand occasionally tapping the handlebars in rhythm. You pass cattle who look as unimpressed with your journey as you feel terrified by it. But then the land opens up again. And just when you're convinced your spine has become part of the suspension system, he brakes suddenly but somehow gently and points down a slope. You thank him, though your vocal cords are still on strike from the windburn, and you descend toward the water. The path is soft, dusty, lined with acacia trees and the low hum of insects who seem to have graduated from the Annoyance with Honors program. The river sparkles in the late light. Birds swoop low across the surface, and somewhere nearby someone is singing, not for you, not for an audience, just because. The kind of singing people do when they're alone but feel accompanied by the sky. And there, on a flat rock that leans into the river, like it's tired of standing, sits an old man with a jabina. Because of course he does. He doesn't turn around when you approach, just gestures without looking to a woven mat beside him. You take the invitation. Shoes off, ankles in the cool, moving water. This isn't a household ceremony. It isn't a monastic rite. It isn't urban. It's something else. It's solitary, and maybe spiritual in a way that feels entirely outside doctrine. He doesn't say a word as he begins. The beans are in a small clay bowl. He crushes them with a rounded stone, not a grinder, each motion slow and meditative. You can hear the scrape of stone on clay, the crunch of roasted bean cracking like brittle bark. Mainstream fact check. While the communal Ethiopian coffee ceremony gets all the love solitary preparation, especially among elders, wanderers, and shepherds, has always been part of the cultural undercurrent. Not everyone has a crowd. Not everyone wants one. The water in the jabina begins to heat. He adds the ground beans, the scent rising almost immediately, bold and earthy, chasing off the mosquito cloud like it knows it has authority. The old man finally speaks. One word. Sost. 3. It means 3. You nod like you understand. Maybe you do. Maybe you don't. He pours the first round without ceremony, no incense, no flowers, no arrangement. Just cup to hand, hand to mouth. You sip. It's not the best coffee you've had on this journey. It's gritty, slightly overboiled, but somehow it's perfect, because there's no performance here. It's just coffee and river and wind and birds and time. Fringe theory incoming. Some ethnographers speculate that these solitary ceremonies preserve an even older form of coffee culture predating community ritual, rooted in animism or ancestor reverence. One theory even suggests the act of drinking alone by water was once seen as communion with river spirits, a way to ask for rain or safe passage. The second round comes in silence. You both sip slowly, the sun dips lower, colors shift, the world softens. Historians still argue whether solitary ceremonies evolved in response to isolation or were the original template later replaced by communal rituals as societies clustered into villages. Was the coffee fire always meant to be surrounded by friends, or did it begin like this? Just you heat water and thought, it doesn't really matter now. You're here. You're part of it. The man hums a deep, vibrating hum, like he's tuning a cello buried inside his chest. It's not a song you recognize. Maybe no one else ever will. Then he reaches into a worn leather pouch and pulls out a tiny hand-carved wooden spoon. He dips it into a small jar, something herbal mint maybe, or crushed leaves with anise, and sprinkles a bit into the third cup. You tilt your head. He says nothing. You drink. And suddenly the bitterness softens and the flavor expands. There's something wild in it, like chewing bark under moonlight or kissing someone who lives in the forest. Not sweet, but real. He nods approving, not of the coffee, but of your reaction. Another quirky note: in some rural areas, solitary drinkers personalize their final round with herbs, even small drops of honey or spiced ghee. It's never standardized. It's always instinctual. What feels needed in that moment, that hour, that weather of the soul. You sit there for a while, who knows how long. Time bends beside the river. The air cools, insects grow bolder. You feel your body soften like bread left to rise. Eventually he packs up, doesn't offer to share the last dregs, doesn't ask your name, doesn't look back as he walks off into the tall grass like a ghost with arthritis. You stay a few minutes longer. There's no lesson here, no grand insight, just the quiet truth that coffee, when prepared with presence, even if only for one, is enough to mark time, to sanctify space, to say, I am here, I am awake, I am real. You finally rise, dust off your hands, and begin the slow walk back toward the road. The river glimmers beside you, like it's heard the same stories for centuries, and never tires of them. Your footsteps fall into rhythm again. Not quick, not slow, just forward. And up ahead, the sky turns indigo. Somewhere in the distance, a Wareda celebration is starting. Drums, horns, you catch the scent of roasted maize and wood smoke. You smile, because you're not done yet. Your feet find the road again just as twilight wraps the valley in layers of blue and rust. Overhead, the stars start to prick through the dusk, like someone's flicking a switch one dot at a time. You hear music now closer. It's not subtle. It pulses with rhythm and life, drums pounding like hearts that refuse to quiet down just because the sun went to bed. You follow the sound. Soon you reach a cluster of tents and flickering lanterns, a makeshift field market with voices raised in song and barter. This isn't a formal village, it's a Wareda celebration. Think of it as a rural block party, but with more donkeys and a lot less zoning regulation. Entire communities gather for seasonal festivals, marriage announcements, harvest Thanksgivings, or sometimes for no better reason than, why not? You slip into the crowd. A child in a too large sweater hands you a stick of roasted corn unasked. A man with 6 teeth and a lion's confidence tries to teach you the footwork to a dance that involves more hip than you possess. And off to the side, just past the row of woven baskets and wild honey cellars, sits yet another coffee fire. It's almost expected now. Wherever the people gather, the beans will follow. But this one's different again. It's communal, yes, but layered with performance. You see not just one woman preparing the coffee, but 3. All dressed in matching shama, their hair braided in intricate rows, their movements synchronized like a well-rehearsed play. They pour the water in unison, stir the beans together, laugh at identical moments. It's mesmerizing. This is the ceremonial performance of Buna as cultural art form, not just something shared, but something presented. Mainstream history moment. As the Ethiopian coffee tradition matured, it grew beyond the private and sacred into the performative. Especially during festivals or public holidays, certain communities developed choreographed coffee-making events to showcase grace, unity, and hospitality. Some villages even host informal competitions. Who can roast the most fragrant batch, who tells the funniest story during tona, who gets the biggest laugh with a well-timed eyebrow raise. And yes, there's a whisper of theater to it, but not the kind that distances, the kind that draws you in. Someone pushes you gently forward. You realize there's a spot open in the half circle facing the performers. You sit. The smell is almost unfair. This roast is deeper, spicier, laced with what smells like cinnamon bark and the very idea of warmth. The women begin to pour. The first round a bowl is offered with wide smiles and a bow of the head. Your cup is warm before you even know you're reaching for it. This is not sleepy coffee. This is celebratory coffee. The kind that clinks cups and bursts bubbles and unbuttons tension. Fringe fact alert. Some Ethiopian subgroups believe that coffee consumed during celebration carries additional spiritual energy, not just blessing, but momentum. A sip during a wedding could bring fertility. A sip during harvest might boost the next year's yield. A sip during communal dance, good knees until next season. You sip, and everything around you seems sharper colors, sounds even the breeze on your neck. Now, drums again, louder. The circle breaks as dancers fill the space. Old, young, limping, leaping, they all move with the same joy. No one's watching to critique, they're watching to remember, to belong. You spot a boy trying to juggle 3 fire-roasted maize cobs. He fails, spectacularly. Everyone cheers anyway. Historians still argue whether coffee ceremonies became performative to preserve culture or to entertain outsiders. Some claim it was a response to colonizers' gaze, a way of preserving dignity through curated hospitality. Others say this kind of coffee showmanship predates foreign eyes. It's simply how people here express love loudly, proudly, and in sync. A girl taps your shoulder, offers a refill, second round. Tona. You thank her, smile wide. Your tongue is coated in the earthy sweetness of the beans, and your brain hums with the kind of gentle buzz that has nothing to do with caffeine and everything to do with presence. Then another voice rises singing, not modern pop, not folk either, something older. It echoes across the field like it's calling up ghosts or calming them. You feel it in your ribs, a fringe detail. In some areas, singing during the coffee ceremony is believed to awaken the memory of ancestors, not ghosts to be feared, but wisdom keepers to be acknowledged. That song you just heard might have been as much for the past as the people dancing in front of you. You look up, stars everywhere now, the kind of stars you forgot existed. Third round, baraka. It comes slower, as it should. The dancing doesn't stop, but it softens. People sit again. The women with the jabinas pour this last round with extra care. You sip, and you realize something that maybe's been growing all along. These ceremonies, so different each time, aren't versions of the same thing. They're facets. Like light hitting a cut gem, each angle reveals something new, but none of them lie. You can't pick a favorite. That's like asking if rain tastes better in the mountains or in the desert. What you know is this. The flavor of celebration isn't just in the beans, it's in the drums, the laughter, the toddler gnawing on an empty cup like it's a treasure, and somewhere in the background a radio plays a garbled version of a Michael Jackson song. You don't know whether to laugh or cry, so you sip again. Let it anchor you in the absurd, the beautiful, the ancient now. And when someone pulls you to your feet and into the dance well, your hips are still lying, but your heart, that thing is in perfect time. You find yourself swept up in the dance before you can stop it, caught by the rhythm, caught by the movement, caught by the sheer joy of being there with them. The drums pulse through the earth your feet, finding a familiar beat, one that's universal, despite not being yours. You don't know the steps, but you learn quickly, and soon you're lost in the blur of bodies and laughter and the dizzying whirl of feet shuffling and hands clapping. It doesn't matter that your coordination is questionable at best. Everyone's stumbling at some point, and nobody's counting. The more you trip, the more they cheer. It's the kind of dance that feels less about looking good and more about feeling alive. The coffee has made its rounds. The jabina has seen countless hands, but still it's here in the flicker of the lanterns, in the swirl of dust rising from the feet, in the smells of roasted grain and wood smoke that you find the essence of it all. It's not just about drinking coffee, it's about what coffee does when you share it. It's the permission to stop time to hold the present moment without hurry, without expectation. A moment just for connection, just for now. You think back to the earlier ceremonies, the ones where people sat solemnly staring into the flames. Those were moments of reflection. The communal dances, though, this celebration. This is a moment of connection, a reminder that when coffee is shared, the boundaries blur. No one's watching the clock. No one's worrying about the next thing. In that space, time folds into itself and becomes a dance of its own. You sip your final round the baraka. The taste has deepened, mellowed, woven into something almost transcendent, like the calm of the night wrapping itself around you. And it's in this cup, this last one, that you realize coffee is both a literal and a metaphorical bridge. Between lands, between generations, between people, it's an anchor in the storm of daily life, a vessel of stories and laughter and silent understanding. But more than that, it's the thread that stitches together moments like this. These wild, energetic moments of shared human spirit where even language doesn't matter. Where the only things that matter are the rhythm of your breath and the shared joy of being in sync with one another. It doesn't matter that you're not from here, that your life is different, your background foreign. The coffee connects you to a timeless tradition, one that's existed for centuries before you and will likely stretch on long after you're gone. It holds people in a gentle embrace, whispering the same stories it's always told, never changing, never tiring of telling them. You find a quiet spot at the edge of the crowd, resting your hands on your knees as you catch your breath. The energy around you is a steady hum now, as the dancers move into the background and the laughter softens. The last notes of the song fade into the night air, and the world around you begins to settle again, back into its natural pace. Historians still argue whether the performances like the ones you've seen tonight are meant to preserve the ritual for the future, or if they're simply a joyful outgrowth of people finding new ways to live their old traditions. Maybe it's a little bit of both. Maybe it's the timeless beauty of a ritual that has always found a way to adapt, just as it has always found a way to endure. And as the final embers of the fire die down, the crowd begins to thin, heading home in small groups, their laughter and chatter lingering like ghosts behind them. You follow the others back down the road, your feet light and your spirit buoyed by the evening's celebrations. The breeze is cooler now, the last traces of warmth leaving the night. The sounds of the village fade into the distance, replaced by the quiet of the land settling into sleep. But there's still a sense of connection, still a hum in the air. You carry the energy of the evening with you, the taste of the coffee lingering on your tongue, its warmth filling the space inside you. And though you're walking back alone, you realize you aren't truly alone at all. The coffee has woven its thread between you and everything that came before and everything that will come after. You're part of something far older than yourself. Something that transcends time and place, something shared. As you approach your destination, another home, another shared meal, another ceremony, you know that it doesn't matter where you go from here. What matters is that this moment, this connection, is part of you. You've carried it with you, and you always will. The sky above is pure ink now, and the stars stretch endlessly in every direction. You pause for a moment to take it all in, the vastness, the stillness, and the hum of life around you. You're not sure when you'll sleep tonight, but it doesn't matter. You've already been grounded in the heart of a centuries-old tradition that will continue whether you're awake or asleep. And as you take your next step, the journey continues further into the night, further into the tradition, further into the stories yet to be told. Good night, sweet dreams.